Hello, I'm Ezra Ramacher, the South Central Midwest editor at Insurance Journal.
Hi, everyone. I'm Elizabeth Lossfield, the deputy editor for Carrier Management.
And I'm Alan Lehman. I'm a content editor at Insurance Journal.
And welcome back to the Insurance Wrap-Up, Episode 2. We made it to our second episode. And for anyone listening through a podcast platform or on LinkedIn Live, thanks for tuning in. This is a special episode because we'll take a look at some of the content from Carrier Management's recent InsurTech Summit, Unlocking the Future of Insurance. This was an amazing event. We had so many great guests sharing their expertise and great audience turnout as well. So thank you to everyone who participated and tuned in, but no worries if you missed it. You can sign up to view all of the content on demand at the InsurTechSummit.com. So let's dive into some of these clips now.
Yeah, Elizabeth, I have really enjoyed going back and looking at some of the recordings from what was a really great event and some really, really great panels that we hosted. In this first one, we're going to look at a panel that y'all hosted, or that you hosted, Elizabeth, with Margo Giles. She talked about the technologies that will shape collaboration between insurers and tech companies. Let's hear what she had to say.
What technologies do you think will most significantly shape collaboration between insurers and insurtech providers over the next few years? And what should industry leaders kind of do to prepare for the future?
Yeah, so it's not going to be sexy, guys. But really what I see happening is with the rise of agentic AI, and if listeners don't know what agentic AI is, it's basically a bunch of generative AI bots talking to each other and cross system to be able to do complex workflows without human intervention, right? So we know without a shadow of a doubt that we are moving quickly to that place. The unfortunate part is that if you have systems that are not hyper-connected and your data is not hyper-connected, it's going to be very difficult for those agentic AI to perform all of these functions. And I think what everyone on the insurer and on the agent and broker side is kind of starting to look at those core systems now and go, ooh, is this really going to carry us the next 10 or 20 years? It's not shiny, but infrastructure, in my opinion, is going to be at the forefront, at least for the next 5 years, so that we can make this leapfrog from doing things on-prem and very manual, very paper-based. Even though we've been great at digitizing, it's still really tied to those PDFs. And into something that's a lot more digital PDFs now, PDFs nonetheless. Something that's much more efficient when you need to exchange large amounts of data very securely, across multiple systems. And those that can nail that in the next couple of years are going to be well positioned to adopt some of this new technology that's coming out right now.
I'm glad that she brought up this agentic AI topic because I think it's really fascinating. It's sort of new to the industry, and I think we'll hear more about it in some future content. So definitely stay tuned for that. I also loved speaking with this next panel on the same topic about insurtech partnerships. And in this clip, we'll hear from Alexis Vaughn of Off Course Consulting about some of the biggest barriers insurers run into when they're adopting new technology. So let's check it out. And I know all of you mentioned that things are changing quite rapidly and insurers are sort of getting up to speed with technology, but there has been in the past some hesitancy to sort of embrace some of this new technology. So I'm curious, Alexis, what do you see now as the most common barriers when it comes to insurers adopting new technology?
Working a lot with both the insurers and the insurtechs, and a lot of times what I do is bring a lot of these partnerships together to create this collaboration. I've seen a lack of education. That's normally a big barrier that we have to cross, especially depending on what line of business it is, if it's property and casualty or if it's on the life and health side. So really that helping everyone to understand, like, this is what the process can look like. This is how fast it can go versus, and also that fear of job replacement as well. And them totally not understanding how to work alongside the tech instead of only seeing it as, this is what it's supposed to replace. And then we also, I also see a lot of fear of working with insurtechs who overpromise and underdeliver as well. So that's important because that's kind of where that frenemies word came in when it came to insure and insurtech collaborations. Like, imagine investing and then deploying technology that fails in a large organization like an insurer, which is why we have even come in and said, hey, why don't we start doing technology audits before we actually, go all in on a new solution with an insurer and InsurTech collaboration, because we just want to make sure that they get exactly what they're promised and not what's on the roadmap a few months from now. So I think that's we've created our own image problem when it comes to that. So I know that's something that those are some of the hurdles that we have to get over and cross. But we have to really be able to do the work together by also following through on what we say we can deliver and not over promising as well, because insurers want what can actually be done. Normally it would have taken an insurer 10 years to do what an InsurTech can get done in a year time frame. So I think that's important, creating that trust there. Because that's going to help to decrease that fear around, all those different barriers that can come into play.
That was a very informative and very forthright clip there. So I learned quite a bit from that discussion. In this next clip, Elizabeth speaks with Jean Finnegan, Vice President of Enterprise Innovation at Nationwide, about critical ways that insurance carriers partner with InsurTechs. Finnegan speaks about how collaboration between carriers and InsurTechs can enhance technology, underwriting, claims processing, and more.
I know we're talking about some of that collaboration between, InsurTechs and more traditional insurers. And I'm curious how you see that collaboration sort of evolving to shape the future of insurance over the next few years.
Yeah, fantastic question. At Nationwide, we've got really a long history of partnering with InsurTechs, and feel that those partnerships have allowed us to operate faster, solve problems faster, and really expand our reach. I'll mention a couple of them just for fun. We've got a relationship with Bolt Penguin. We've got a relationship with a company named Ondo with a water damage prevention device, LeakBot. We've got Shore, which is a rental insurance quote app. So we have been really partnering with InsurTechs for a long time. And collaboration between InsurTechs and insurers is super important. And, I think about a couple of different spaces where it really helps us to kind of accelerate and kind of shape the future. So I think about things like technology enhancements. Continued enhancements in AI can really help us to streamline underwriting, claims processing, improve pricing, and how we make sure customers get the right price, the right coverage at the right price. Another space that I think where that collaboration can really help us is in terms of agility. We're all facing rapidly changing markets, and I don't even want to think about what's going on in the stock market today, but there's rapidly changing market conditions, there's climate change, and being able to adapt and move quickly, it's so important for us to be able to offer the right products and coverages and to continue to evolve to meet the growing and changing needs of our customers. And, when I said that we work on the next and future, we're really looking ahead to what can we do next to meet those customer needs? And then finally, I think another place where the collaboration has an absolutely huge role to play is in, integration, really pulling together products and services into platforms, because it's increasingly important to really meet customers where they are with truly effortless experiences.
Yeah, it was interesting to actually hear some of the ways that Nationwide already partners with InsurTechs, and also hear how Jean sees the relevance remaining as we move forward. Next up, we have a clip from Elizabeth's panel that focused on modernizing legacy systems. James Benham told viewers how insurers can close those gaps, specifically how they can close the biggest gaps that legacy systems present today. Here's what he said.
I'm curious also what some of the biggest technological gaps are that you see in legacy insurance systems today and how insurers can kind of close those gaps.
Yeah, so this is why we actually built Terra, because when you look at the small insurance sector, when you're looking at, $20 million, $30 million, $40 million programs out there that are, a lot of the ones I work with in work comp that are comp plus GL, maybe commercial property, commercial auto, or maybe employer's liability. I mean, it depends on the lines of business they support, but these aren't massive programs. but they insure a lot of people. and when you're talking about legacy systems, a lot of those companies are still dealing, and look, a lot of the really big companies are still dealing with on-prem, non-cloud native technology solutions. So they're still struggling with servers and storage and networking and, buying new equipment or supporting. I had one client we just peeled off with Terra that was on an old AS400 system, and they were tired of paying for the maintenance and support of this really super old legacy system. So there's still a lot of legacy tech. Insurance was a prime mover in software. Right, it was actually an early adopter, which means it's got the early adopter's dilemma, which is you have some stuff that was revolutionary at the time that's no longer revolutionary, and that's problematic because then you have to do something about it, right? Like because a lot of those are end of life. The products aren't supported anymore. Software's not supported, or the hardware is failing or not supported, and really they shouldn't be worried about any of those things. They really shouldn't. They should be worried about their combined ratio. They should be worried about loss control and prevention. They should be worried about all the insurance stuff, and not worried about whether their hard drives are failing and they have to order more of them because they're running out of storage space. And so some of them are dealing with like 20-year-old problems that really have to be revolutionized. It's certainly why we built Terra, but you've got to help people. In one of a couple of different ways on JBK, because we service people that use, we're kind of core system agnostic on JBK. These are separate businesses, right? And at JBK, we're core system agnostic. We'll work and build solutions around anything, right? We're not tied to any one core system. So we see people using a whole bunch of different systems, some of which are 20 or 30 years old. And it's actually really super scary for them to upgrade. Almost every provider of core enterprise systems is promoting their own version of cloud. Some of their cloud options really aren't real cloud. It's just them lifting and shifting things into a server that's somewhere else. And so you can't really take advantage. And so I would say that's the other big challenge is for an average insurance executive out there that's super smart in insurance may not understand all the technology topics to kind of peel through the weeds and figure out what's going to be beneficial long term for them. Like what's real cloud? Like is it cloud native? Can it leverage the cognitive services from Microsoft Azure? Can it leverage Amazon Web Services AI algorithms? Can it use this, or are we just literally leasing servers that are somewhere else, which is not really true cloud computing? Because there's 5 core criteria that define if something's cloud computing. And if it's scalable, and if it's programmable, and if it's broadly accessible, and if it easily configurable, and a lot of those things are not. And so I'd say that's probably the biggest challenge around legacy systems is figuring out, hey, is the cloud version, quote unquote, that my legacy system's offering me, is that going to really enable me to operate for the next 20 years, or at least the next 10? Or is this just a Band-Aid stopgap they're providing to try and keep me from looking around? Right. And then, is the technology I'm using going to be end of life? Like, did I build this on Silverlight, which Microsoft stopped supporting, or did I build this on any one of another set of technologies? You're always having to deal with obsolescence in technology. And so I'd say that's probably the biggest challenge. And then, you got to ask yourself, are you having conversations that were relevant in 2005, but they're not in 2025? You should not be talking about storage and servers anymore. Just shouldn't be. That's totally. So I don't really see why anyone needs to own servers at this point. We certainly, our 270 combined people between the two companies. I mean, we went all cloud years ago and stopped running our own servers.
I love talking to James. He was so great and so informative, and he's a true bootstrapping entrepreneur. He built his business in his college dorm room, built it into this huge company. As he said, he has 270 employees across both of his companies, and there was a lot to learn from him. So I was happy that he took the time to speak with me for the summit. And I also spoke with a great panel of experts about overhauling legacy systems in insurance as part of this topic for the summit. And it was a fascinating discussion as well about some of the considerations for getting rid of or upgrading old technology. So in this clip, John Spottiswoode of Jerry.ai talks about whether it makes sense to build new tech in-house, to partner with an InsurTech that has those capabilities, or to take a hybrid approach. So let's check out what he had to say. And I know, obviously there's a lot to think about and many different ways that you can modernize. And I'm curious, John, how should insurers decide whether they should build technology in-house, partner with an InsurTech provider, or take sort of a hybrid approach? And what factors should they consider in those decisions?
Great question. So I think if there's a piece of technology that's like really central to what you do, it's sort of strategic, then you probably want to build that in-house so that you can tailor it to exactly the way you want. But building something from scratch obviously takes time. And if you don't have a lot of the expertise in-house, it can also be very expensive. So it's really important to ask, is this strategic a differentiator, and is it worth the investment? I think for a lot of tech, everything from digital quotes to claims automation, anything that impacts the customer experience, that oftentimes partnering with an InsurTech provider will provide, faster speed to market, and also give you sort of expertise that's been leveraged across multiple companies throughout the industry. So again, it's probably the better solution in many of those cases. It'll be faster to implementation as well. But I think for most insurers, there's going to end up being a hybrid approach. That's the best route. The essential things you build in-house, everything else, you work with a reputable partner. And one thing I would say, especially as it comes to AI, things that have intellectual capital involved, if you end up working with a third party, I think it's important to work with one that it's white box, where you still kind of own the IP. If you ever do decide you need to move from that provider to another, you're not only leaving the software, but you're leaving all the IP behind. To me, that's something that you definitely want to avoid. So as you're, making the decision, I would consider how fast does it need to happen, right? If it has to happen quickly, probably more likely to want to work with a third party. Do you have the resources in-house, the right team, and the right culture, as Bernadette mentioned? Then that can impact your decision. How big of an impact is it going to have on your customers? And is it strategic? And I think that if it's competitive and strategic, then even if you really want it quickly, it may make sense to take the time to build it in-house.
Yeah, that was a great discussion there on the pros and cons about going in-house versus outsourcing to a third-party provider, as mentioned there. So we're actually going to shift gears a little bit now towards the regulation side of things. In this next clip, Elizabeth talked with Ryan Griffin of McGill & Partners about how InsurTechs can be mindful of how they mine information in accordance with proper regulatory compliance. Griffin discusses best practices InsurTechs should take to ensure they're operating within the current regulatory landscape.
Did anyone have anything else to add about some of those regulatory hurdles that insurers are facing and how recent developments in AI can sort of impact those?
No, I just think we continue to have to be mindful of the type of data we're mining, right? And using these technologies to make it more efficient, whether it's on the underwriting side, the compliance framework side, and making sure that the people in the field are reporting back how they're using these tools back to the proper channels within corporate governance, data privacy teams. I think that's, and we'll see how the Scott mentioned a lot of the guidance out there on kind of best practices, but you really don't really see the regulatory enforcement until something very egregious happens. So I think that's the piece. You don't want to be the first one to get in trouble, but I think that'll wake everybody up to some of the potential landmines that exist on the deployment of some of these new technologies.
Yeah, well put by Ryan there. I think he really hit the compliance nail on the head. Next up, we have Marcus Daly's take on balancing the drive for innovation with transparent decision making. Let's watch his clip.
I know that sometimes it's easy to get bogged down with, regulatory compliance and all the steps you need to take. So I'm curious, Marcus, your perspective on how InsurTechs and insurers can kind of balance the drive for innovation with the need for, transparent decision making and all the processes that go into, keeping up with regulations.
Yeah, I think probably there's a lot of different ways to answer that question. I by the way, I do want to say that I appreciate Scott's point on insurance being like the foundation of a strong economy. I do think that one of the things that AI brings to the table is the ability perhaps to serve the underserved. I do think that that's true, very much so, and I think it can also help with reducing bias. But again, to Scott's point, obviously the people who create it and then manage it are really the ones that are steering it, and that's what's going to define whether or not it's going to meet those objectives or not. I do think, when I think about how do you, if you're an insurer, get started or maybe even want to get aggressive, I think it's really, to be honest with you, first just get started, right? Getting started does not mean you need to deploy it into production. It just means that you need to start working with it. You can always do POCs. You can always do, different types of tests. But I think until you actually get started with it and work with it, that it's always going to appear, there's always going to be reasons not to, right? And the problem, in my fear, is that because it's advancing so quickly, that those who are jumping in and are, have controls in place to be able to offset the risks, as they work, as they move forward, and then are deploying it, that you're going to find that there's perhaps less of a need for so many providers, right? Because if they get particularly good at it, and the AI is helping them with the decision making, then their decision making is going to be so efficient that it'll box out a lot of other players. And I do think that is a significant risk. And look, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I don't think you should prevent that. But it does, to me, mean that for everybody involved, small or large, just get involved. And maybe one other point I would say is popular media likes to find something they can create a story around, right? And it can be very confusing if you're not in the AI space when you hear things and you'll think that, and I'll give you an example like DeepSeek. You'd be like, oh, DeepSeek's just bad. Turns out that it's a fantastic engineering team. They've actually open sourced their work. I do agree that using the model being hosted in China is not a wise idea, but the actual tech is open source and can be utilized to do a lot of great things in-house in a protected environment, run by the business and controlled by the business, right? It's just math. And so I do think also having an open mind while also making sure that you follow due diligence can lead to also businesses being able to move more quickly too without fear. So, but again, if I could give any advice, it would just get started, right?
Yeah, I loved speaking with Marcus on this panel, and this was a really great panel discussion overall. I know that emerging risk is a big topic of discussion when it comes to the use of new technologies in insurance. And with AI becoming more and more prevalent in the insurance industry, emerging legal risks are a consideration for insurers and insurtechs alike. So also on this panel, Scott Seaman of law firm Hinshaw and Culbertson spoke with me about all of this on sort of navigating the legal and regulatory compliance landscapes. Let's check out what he had to say. Scott, I'm curious, I know that you focus a lot on emerging risks. And are there any emerging legal risks regarding the use of AI technology that insurers should be aware of?
There are some, but I'd like to, before I get into that, just put it in a little bit of perspective, which is that, insurance really is the key to economic growth and stability in the economy. And it's been the talent and creativity of the talented people inside insurance companies, outside, such as Marcus and Ryan, that it really have stepped up and delivered. And so we've seen them be able to thrive and be a backstop for the economy through good times and bad, in a world that's been supercharged by social inflation and replete with every challenge imaginable. The main thing is insurers have to emerge as the leaders, the masters of AI, because that's going to be a major determinant of their success in the future. And I know it's a little bit strange for an insurance lawyer to say this, but you really have to lead with the AI. And then if the AI is good, it's almost always going to be possible to make it compliant. If you can't achieve compliance, it usually means that the AI is flawed in some respects. So win that war, get that technology going, and then check it against compliance, obviously, before you use it.
Yeah, those were some wise words there from Scott about just the importance of AI and how it's not going anywhere in the insurance industry. And in this next clip, Elizabeth talks with Michael Parcelli of Exceedance on how insurers can best combine the tools of automation with human oversight. Parcelli expects that automation will be able to pick up a greater percent of oversight and auditing work in the future, allowing humans to be much more productive.
And I'm curious your advice or what you would sort of recommend for insurers to balance the automation piece of it with the necessary, human component to make sure that they're being, efficient as well as accurate.
Yeah, I think there's always going to be, it's not going to replace humans, wholesale. There's still going to be an exception management trail there, and you still want an auditor and some oversight. So, for example, when I was working with predictive models for underwriting, we still had last case scenario. You wouldn't let the model just choose the price, right? It's not parametric insurance, but it enables you to look through. So I think that you'll still have a balance, but you're going to change the shift. So whereas you may have done 80% of the work in the past and maybe 20% of the oversight and auditing, you can spend 20% on your work and then leave that 80% for the tools and enabling technologies to pick that up. Therefore, you can by fourfold you can start to do much more work and be much more productive, relying on sort of the operational day-to-day to be done by the technology, and then you just keep your eyes on it to make sure that nothing goes out the door with the wrong information or the wrong terms and conditions. So there's absolutely a need for exception management and oversight.
That's a great explanation from Michael there. And that 80-20 split number, that's really, really powerful. Moving on to I guess it's our final clip. Now, guys, we're going to round out this list here with a clip from Tom Wild, who during the summit, he shared how the insurance industry is shifting into a new era. I think this is a particularly interesting piece of commentary. So let's give it a run.
But you've spoken, Tom, before about how the insurance industry is sort of shifting from its data era into its decision era. And I was wondering if you could unpack that a little bit, talk about what you're seeing and what has sort of led to this shift.
Yeah, I think that the investments in data, the way we describe that, it's really been a race to the starting line, right? It's not the finish line. I think all of the investments insurance companies have made in data, their retention and collection of data is going to turn out to have been hugely valuable. And now with AI, especially AI's capabilities around unstructured data, which make up so much of the insurance landscape, broker submissions, claim submissions, policy guidelines, decisioning authority, all these reside in or begin with unstructured data sources. And so we really now have just an incredible opportunity to make that part of the data landscape. So I think this sort of race to the starting line, getting your data in order so that AI can take advantage of it is going to prove to be one of the keys to compete into the next decade.
What a great final point from Tom to conclude this wrap up about how insurance is kind of entering a new era. And it goes with the theme for the summit too, unlocking the future of insurance. So I guess that's the end of our second episode of the insurance wrap up. And we did some trivia during the summit if you were able to attend. And I think we're going to announce the winners here and also take a look at some promo clips.
So we're very excited to announce our first trivia winner, who is Sharon Zielinski. And she has won a 1-year membership to Carrier Management. Congratulations, Sharon.
Yeah, heck yeah. I believe, that's a $489 value, I think, for her win there. So big win, definitely. And we've got another one here with Sam Hodge. Sam won a 1-year group membership to Carrier Management for up to 5 members of their team. Your membership includes complete unrestricted online access to carriermanagement.com. Which provides insurance company C-suite executives with daily news, white papers, advice, instruction, and editorial on how to manage insurance companies more efficiently and more effectively. So congrats, Sam.
Yeah, congrats to both of the winners. That's exciting. And I think we're going to take a look at a few promo clips. I host another podcast called the Insuring Cyber Podcast that explores the intersection of cyber and insurance, and episodes published monthly on insurancejournal.tv and all major podcast platforms. So I hope you'll tune in if you haven't had a chance. And here's a promo clip to tell you a little bit more. Insurance professionals work hard every day to keep people safe. But as technology transforms the industry, how can insurers protect not only their clients, but also themselves from ever-changing cyber risks? My name's Elizabeth Blossfield, and I'm the host of the Insuring Cyber Podcast, a bi-monthly look into how the world of cyber and the business of insurance are connected.
That's one of our favorite podcasts here at Insurance Journal and Wells Media, so definitely check that out. And now we're actually going to promo a Risky Future on Demand webinar hosted by our colleague Andrea Wells.
Risky Future webinar, presented by Insurance Journal, Transportation, Captives, and Alternative Markets. The webinar dives into the urgent challenges facing fleet insurance today, exposing the mounting pressures on trucking companies and the growing shift toward alternative risk solutions like captives. In this webinar, you will learn the following: how claims trends are impacting the trucking industry, how captives and other alternative markets work and the key factors for success, and the role of TPAs, brokers, and captive managers, plus key roadblocks to be aware of. Hosted by Insurance Journal's Vice President of Content, Andrea Wells. With guests Garrett Yates, Sherry McGonigal-Span, Kenny Planenta, and David Ho. Watch the on-demand video at insurancejournal.com/research.
Yeah, we've been focusing on alternative risk management methods like captives a little bit more recently, I think. I know I wrote up a story from that panel there. And then recently at Risk World in Chicago, we also covered a panel of experts there who discussed how captives could and will remain viable moving forward, even as the commercial property market overall softens. So just some cool work from our team there all around. This last clip that we're going to promo is also a webinar. It is a cyber webinar that covered the costs and really, really took a deep look at the costs of data breaches.
The cost of data breaches, lessons, settlements, and safeguards. Join this panel of experts for an in-depth discussion on the evolving landscape of data breach settlements and the critical role of cyber insurance in mitigating financial exposure. Panelists will explore how insurers evaluate cyber risks, the rising demand for cyber policies, and the necessity of implementing strong cybersecurity measures to reduce liabilities. Hosted by Elizabeth Blossfield, the Deputy Editor of Carrier Management. With guests Tiffany Calhoun of Alliance Commercial, Holly James of RIMS, Dan Burke of Woodruff Sawyer, and Courtney Hands of Entrust. To watch the on-demand video, visit insurancejournal.com/research.
Well, we want to thank y'all for tuning in to our second episode of the Insurance Wrap-Up. Be sure to keep an eye out for future episodes, both on LinkedIn, on your streaming platform of choice, really anywhere that you consume podcasts or media, we'll be there. So until next time, take care.